Friday, Saturday and into Sunday. We can see on the Outlook chart here, sunshine all the way, right the way across the UK, with the exception of the far north of Scotland, and temperatures are responding as well.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Boris Johnson is brushing off criticism that he should be doing more in his final weeks as Prime Minister to tackle the cost of living crisis. It follows an announcement by analysts at Cornwall Insight saying that energy bills could hit £4,200 in the next year. That's around £650 more than previously forecast. Labour is calling on the government to act now, but Boris Johnson says whoever replaces him will be able to take whatever action is necessary.
Whoever he or she may be, they are absolutely certain will be wanting to make some more announcements in September, October about what we're going to do further to help people in the next period in December, January. And I just want you to know that I'm absolutely confident that we will have the fiscal firepower and the headroom to continue to look after people as we've done throughout.
Leadership candidate Rishi Sunak says he would get a grip on illegal migration and stop the boats. His comments come after it was revealed that the number of migrants crossing the Channel this year is on course to hit 20,000. Sources say thousands of people are currently camped around Calais and Dunkirk, waiting to make that journey. Speaking at a hustings event in Doncaster, Mr Sunak said his policies would stop illegal crossings.
Too long, all of us have been watching on our TV screens scenes that are simply unacceptable of people coming here illegally. Now, with my plan, under my leadership, we will finally get a grip of that situation, stop the boats, restore trust, and take back control of our borders.
Speaking at the same event, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the key to solving illegal migration is to make sure that the European Court of Human Rights doesn't have the final say over British laws.
I worked with Priti Patel on the Rwanda scheme. It is the right scheme, but we need to expand it to more countries, and we also need to legislate to make sure the British Bill of Rights cannot be overruled by the ECHR. And we are able to control our own borders.
More than 115,000 Royal Mail workers are set to strike over 4 days in the coming weeks in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union says it'll be the biggest strike of the summer so far. The industrial action is scheduled to take place on the 26th and 31st of this month, and then the 8th and 9th of September. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Time now for those headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners with me, Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, comedic and intellectual titan that is Andrew Doyle. And sitting next to him we have Josh Howie. Always dissed. That's obviously annoy somebody in the audience.
I'm a comedian, but I'm definitely not an intellectual heavyweight.
You don't want to be a titan, do you, when you're doing comedy?
I don't even know what titan means.
Well, it was somewhere sort of between the gods and the nothing.
I didn't know that.
Do you know which ones were titans?
I did. I was being self-deprecating.
No, you're not. Come on, name 3 titans. Come on.
Big Titan.
You'll know from the film Clash of the Titans.
I have seen Clash of the Titans. I saw the sequel as well.
It's not a Clash of Titans. It's an annoyingly misnamed
Was that about
film.
the Greek mythology?
It's about gods. Yeah,
that's right. Well, you have Medusa against the Kraken.
It's Maggie Smith, isn't it? And Laurence Olivier
Maggie Smith, yeah.
swanning around in there.
Believe it or not. I do know about Titans because there's a board game about them.
It's got Pegasus. That's a very good way to learn again.
That's right, I know everything.
Roots in. Right, let's take a look at tomorrow's newspapers. That's what we're here for. We start with the Daily Mail. Minority of babies now born to married couples. The majority of babies born out of wedlock for the first time on record last year. And Ryan Giggs, his case carrying on with a thorough besmirching of his reputation. The Daily Telegraph has inflation stealth tax of £30 billion looms. And the photograph there is Serena Williams, who is easing her way out of professional tennis and has had a photo shoot with Vogue to celebrate the fact, or possibly to mourn it. We'll be taking a look at that story later. The Guardian has Johnson, new PM certain to bail out households over cost of living, and there is the countdown on Williams' retirement again. Financial Times also have Serena on the front page with new powers to override city regulators win Truss's backing, and Carlisle's chief quit after failed request for £300 million pay package over 5 years. How the other half lives, eh? The Daily Mirror has Sir Cliff's grief at the loss of his soulmate, that's Olivia Newton-John, and Giggs cheated on me with 8 women. That is former footballer Ryan Giggs being dissed by his ex, Kate Greville. The Times has Serena Williams, and universities blacklist harmful literature, a big study that they have conducted themselves and released today. We will be taking a look at some of the literature that now comes with a trigger warning, if not a more severe discouragement, and also lie right to help the medicine go down. Intriguing. The Daily Star has an extraordinarily disgusting photograph of a man who's fallen asleep in his vest, by the look of it. Very red alert. They are concerned that the Brits are going to fry in yet another heatwave, and yet more about Ryan Giggs. So those are the front pages. Let's have a look at what lies within. So we kick off with Wednesday's Times, and despite the fact that I cannot believe anyone has put on a single radiator in the last 2 months, we have still more alarming news about fuel prices, Andrew.
We do. I mean, you'll recall that people were talking about, or predicting that the fuel cost would go up to somewhere in the region of $3,700 a year for most families, most households. And now they're saying that it's going to be roughly 700 more than that. So by the time we get to April, they're going to peak at 4,400. This is being described as a fresh shock.
So this is
consumers.
April 2023.
That's right.
So the coldest 3 months of the year are the 3 that lead up to that then?
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct, yes. Right. So this is all... Now, obviously, this just seems to be getting worse. Every time there's a new report regarding this, and it's because Ofgem are allowing the cap to increase at every stage. But they're also, of course, as you remember, I think back in May, they said that they would enable companies to make these changes every 3 months rather than every 6 months. The idea would be that when they made savings, those could be fed out to the consumers more rapidly. But I mean, the reality is it just seems to mean that the rising prices are going to be brought to people more quickly. That seems to be what's actually happening here.
Yeah.
And I just think people are going to be in trouble. I mean, this,
that's a huge
it's
amount of money.
such a huge amount of money.
And that's for the average. I mean, it's obviously slightly, I don't know, deceptive. Is that the word? It's not necessarily that helpful because you don't know how big a house that is or how many people live in it.
No, but as soon as you're increasing bills by the order of thousands of pounds, I mean, that is the difference. I mean, so many families are already struggling.
Yeah,
they're basically saying the End Fuel Poverty Coalition is saying that a third of UK households will be in fuel poverty. That's according to how the government defines it.
The government's own definition.
Yeah.
So do we have any idea how that definition works? It's based on the fact that you can't afford to heat the house as much as you would like to, I suppose.
Choose one of the... And people having to choose food or heat.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not just households. I mean, this is businesses. It's the public sector. I mean, this is going to affect absolutely everything. And, I think it does have to spark a conversation about the need for cheap and reliable energy, about the need for a new strategy. We've
we've been having these conversations, but of course, until about 2 years ago, all the conversation was about how can we switch to green, wasn't it? Sustainable, how can we save the planet from overheating?
Right.
And of course, part of what we're confronting is, a shift away from cheap but ultimately environmentally damaging fuel sources.
Right, so maybe there should be a conversation about fracking, which I suppose wasn't particularly popular with the environmentalists.
Well, it should, I think.
And certainly about nuclear energy. I mean, we've got, I think it's 7 of 8 of the current nuclear reactors are set to be retired by 2030. So, France sorted this decades ago and they invested in nuclear energy and now they're reaping the benefits. So we should, although that's not going to solve things in the short term, we have to have the conversation, right?
No, well, you see that quote this week, who is it, from someone who basically said, oh no, if we build a nuclear...
Clegg.
Yeah, it was Clegg, was it?
Yeah,
Clegg,
from 2015.
Yeah, so saying, well, what's the point? If we build a nuclear power station, it won't come online until 2021 or 2.
Yeah,
and you're like, that's the thing, But the problem is, it's always this sort of short-term emergency running to... And we haven't had a visionary government, it seems like, for a long time who is willing to to think that 20, 30 years ahead of these things. And now we're reaping the benefits.
They're thinking of the next electoral cycle. That's about it, really.
That is the way our politics is always organised. And, of course, things like the war don't help, but they also provide a scapegoat as well, I suspect, don't they? Allow them to sort of get off the hook when, in reality, they should have been organising something much more systemically robust.
Right. Well, we do. Yeah, I mean, we need to assume that there are going to be global conflicts and various things going on around the world that will, damage our energy resources, and we need something in place.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope they've been listening. Josh, Wednesday's Guardian now, continuing on the fuel price furore. The heir apparent is refusing to bait her hook with promises to intervene.
No, so Liz Truss doubles, this is the headline, Liz Truss doubles down on refusal to offer support over rising energy bills. This is because in the past she said she's not going to actually just give out these handouts. What she's saying is she's going to do tax cuts. That's her sort of priority instead.
Yep.
So I'm going to call this my misleading headline of the day because she hasn't doubled down on anything. What she didn't do is and then later it says, while she has not definitively ruled out another direct help. So she hasn't said, I definitely won't do it, but she's chosen again to talk about the reversing, taking out the tax cut, putting in tax cuts.
It's different mechanisms, basically.
Yeah, basically. And she's also got this idea of suspending the green levies, but critics of that saying, well, first of all, that's only going to save people about £150.
Right.
And secondly, the tax cuts isn't going to necessarily benefit the people who need it most, people out of work, pensioners. Now, I read a thing today, I can't sustain it because I read on Twitter, but I can't prove, but it said that 10 million people have savings of less than £100. And it also said that 25%, the 25 poorest people in the country have savings of about £2,000. So if you think the jump here is a huge, it's really going to have a massive impact. And what we're not seeing from her is, or really Rishi either, to be fair, is this targeted idea of let's actually help the people who need it most.
Yeah. Well, I mean, her whole mantra is about economic growth and cutting taxes and all of the rest of it, and she says that this will have this broad effect. But you're right, I mean, the things that she suggested, the green levies, the reversal of the national insurance, this is, I mean, one critic described it as spitting in the wind, and I think that's probably right. It's not going to do anything, is it? But, she's sticking to her mantra. It's interesting to consider, though, what the ramifications of her direction are going to be for electoral success for the Tories next time. You've had Dominic Raab. He wrote, apparently, he was right. I know he's backing Rishi Sunak, but he described this as an electoral suicide note for the Conservatives if they don't face up to this issue.
Well, for the Conservatives, one of the big concerns with the Conservatives is keeping old people coming out and voting for them, isn't it? Be brutal about it. I mean, they have always relied on the pensioner vote, and old people are going to feel the cold more. You know,
they are.
They're not going to be.
I mean, it sounds straightforward, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's
well, maybe they want to get them cold, so they'll leave the house to vote in a nice, warm voting booth.
Oh, we see
eased into it, yeah.
Sort of get. But
have to keep the voting booths hotter than houses. Then they'll have to maintain.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where that's how get them out and voting for them.
It's very conspiratorial.
It could be, but Truss did say she said what's vitally important at this moment, as you said, is this is her position, is that we get the economic growth going. But that is true, and that people don't starve or freeze to death.
They're going into a really bad situation now. We've got strikes. I mean, this is coming up. More news about strikes, inflation, you know, and this is all, of course, in the aftermath of COVID, and they have got to try and get the economy going again, because otherwise they won't just be able to constantly give out handouts. But it does seem an extraordinary amount of the fuel price increases are just morally indefensible, you know, huge amounts of profits, and also fuel prices have gone up. Like, I know this is a separate issue, but not entirely separate issue. Fuel prices at the pumps have gone up by about 50%.
Yeah.
And that fuel price is very largely tax.
Yeah.
And it remains largely tax in this country, so that's been a huge windfall. They talk about windfall tax. Well, that's a windfall to the government. They should turn that around immediately, I would have thought.
So I think what you're suggesting there is that, I mean, the Lib Dem suggestion of an energy furlough scheme will probably just exacerbate the problem, since it was a furlough scheme that got us into this problem to begin with.
Andrew, the next story is in Wednesday's Independent. This one, I have to say, tests my capacity for economic credulity to some extent, but try and explain it to me.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to get my head around it, because I don't fully understand why this has happened. There's a new trend, which is called the Great Resignation. And apparently people over 50s are just not going back to work after the pandemic. Apparently there was an exodus of around 1 million people from the workforce since the pandemic. And this obviously shrunk the labour market. It's also driven up inflation. And this article sort of doesn't really explain why, because I'm trying to work out why it would be that older employees wouldn't want to go back to work.
They've said that, and then secondly, it's somebody from John Lewis, isn't it? But secondly, they've said that's what's causing inflation, because they're being forced to raise the salaries of people to keep them in. And that is forcing up inflation. That's forcing up the cost. But if they're struggling to hold on to staff, their costs should be going down. You might get poorer service. But if John Lewis have got like 200 people per store, and now a quarter of them have left. Well, and then they're having to pay the 75% that remain a bit more. Well, those things balance out.
Well, also, older people get paid more as well, so you would have thought there would be a saving there. And also, from what I've seen from a number of people who have left work, a lot of employers are simply filling the gaps with existing employers. They're not refilling those roles.
Exactly my experience.
But also, inflation goes high, the stuff's too expensive to buy, so there's less customers, so you need less people.
These things do have a way of self-correcting if you give them time. I don't understand who these 50-year-old people are who've just thought, I'll just retire.
How can they afford it? Well, I know we got used to not doing much in the pandemic, but how can? But now we've got to pay bills, right?
It might be because they worked at John Lewis, which is famously a great place to work. A friend of mine got
successful socialist.
Yeah, a friend of mine got a job there and was like insanely chuffed. They were like, I'm sorted for life. So it could be that it's specifically John Lewis workers who are going, I'm in my 50s, I've done pretty good over the last 20 years, and now
my wife worked for Waitrose, which is obviously part of John Lewis, for a while in their PR department, and she said it was fantastic, treatment of staff. It is tremendously good. I can't understand why people are leaving that.
I think the other interesting part of this story, though, is what she's talking about, how they're very consciously only giving their employees a 2% pay increase with a 3% bonus, which is very far away from what other industries across the country are saying. Like, everybody else is going, well, it's 9%, so we want 9%. Where they're going,
speaking
no.
Of which, we have more strike action now. Postal workers are threatening to walk out. I'm not sure they thought that through, actually.
So, and I also wonder how they got the ballots. As well. But the Communication Workers Union, CWU, said that they're about 115,000 staff. It's going to be the biggest strike of the summer. What's a few interesting things. 97% voted to take action, and that's of a 77% turnout. That's quite a high turnout for these kind of things. They said that they've only been offered a 2% pay rise. They're saying their bosses, and I think this is true of what you're seeing across the rail industry and whatever. They're going, well, our bosses are raking in billions, and we're getting hardly anything. That is a fair criticism, arguably, and you're seeing it. And it
lands anyway, doesn't it? You've got to say that it lands. I mean, there was a fellow from the RMT, I think, who did quite a few interviews on the TV
he was
last
amazing.
week, and everyone was saying,
It's hard to argue, but then you could also argue the train drivers earn a ridiculous amount of money anyway. It's like I sort of tend to have this sympathy. Yes, teachers should get more, and nurses, and then then it gets to train drivers, and I'm like,
they do that sitting down. Postal workers, they have to get their calves out in all weathers, it seems.
But also, it's like postal workers is like. Is that going to shut down the country in the same way? Like, is the strike going to have a bigger impact?
To be honest, regard the Royal Mail now as almost optional. I think it's package delivery. Amazon could very easily sort of find a workaround for that.
We've got drones now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to be obsolete. And we've got email.
And mainly what they deliver is these. Well, they used to be junk mail, but now it's like junk books, isn't it? Like these catalogues for. It might just be what my wife orders.
It's interesting. But the other one. Well, on the other hand, I was thinking that they should buy Hermes, make Hermes so terrible, even more terrible. It's now called Every, and that might have been. This is my conspiracy of the day.
Greek gods.
Well, there we go. And they make that so bad that everybody's like, we really need Royal Mail for competence, and that's my conspiracy.
Nice idea. Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're probably onto the way these things work.
It is kind of an inevitability now, isn't it? Because everyone is being hit by the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
We've had teachers wanting to strike, we've had barristers wanting to strike. I mean,
stand-ups cannot strike.
No, we can't.
We can't. We're like the army. We're the only people. It's us stand-ups in the army. Wednesday's Guardian now, Andrew, and America inches just a little closer to civil war, I think.
I mean, well, slightly catastrophising, but I mean, goodness me. So this is obviously the raid on Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. This is his private residence, and this is absolutely rocked. I mean, the American media is all over this. This is a major story. Now, the thing about this story is it's obviously now being politicised and weaponised by both sides of the aisle, with lots of Democrats sort of saying this is an excellent thing. We must have, this has to be done. A lot of Republicans now coming out saying we've even had Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, saying he's going to investigate the Justice Department if his party wins control of the chamber next year, which they definitely will.
Yeah.
So all of this, I mean, look. The thing about this, I mean, apparently we haven't been told, this article doesn't say why precisely, what exactly they're looking for.
Some documents that he took home, and they think he's kept, but there's no indication why he might have done.
Well, it says it's still unclear. It's a bit. I mean, they're certainly not conveying the details to the public. And, of course, to get the warrant, it would have had to go to the highest levels of the judiciary. This is really a problem because we know from polling data that the vast majority of Republicans do not trust the FBI.
No.
And ever since the Russian dossier and all of this stuff that turned out to be not true, people have felt that the FBI has a partisan agenda when it comes. They didn't raid Hillary Clinton after the email scandals.
To be fair, immediately before the election in 2016, they did actually interfere to some extent and cast doubt on Hillary's emails thing.
They cast doubt, but there wasn't a raid. I mean, I'm not siding here with anyone. What I'm saying is there is a perception issue when it comes to this kind of thing, right? So the perception being that the FBI is now effectively under a Biden administration, even though the White House is saying it didn't know about this.
Politicised.
That it is that is the perception. Whether it is or not is not for me to say. But that is the perception, and that perception is really, really dangerous when you have a candidate who is almost certainly running in 2024.
And they already think they stole the last election from him. I mean, tens of millions of Americans still absolutely believe that was a con.
And I just think if you're going to do something like this, there just has to be a clear reason for doing so, and that has to be conveyed clearly. They better get the evidence out quickly, is all I'm going to say, because if it's just a dispute with the National Archives of things that should have gone over there, that's not enough. It really isn't.
Well, they went in and they demanded access to a safe, which Trump gave them, and now Trump has furiously released the story, which suggests that he knows very well they didn't find what they were looking for in the safe, because otherwise he wouldn't be quite so bullish on it immediately, would he?
And this is going to play well for him.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's the thing.
Go on, Josh.
Well, I mean, it's interesting how... I mean, I'm not saying I think that you are a big supporter of Trump, but I mean, there are so many passionate supporters of Trump out there, even based in the UK, who sort of see him as this figurehead thing. But there's a lot of other stuff out there that's going on, that not just the investigation into the January 6th riots, but there's also there's investigations that are going on in New York. There's investigations. The prosecutor in Atlanta is basically looking into how he pressurised the state Secretary of State during the, after say, look, find more votes so that Biden doesn't win this election.
That's very...
That's ongoing. The DC Court has just of Appeals has finally said that they can have access to his tax returns, and supposedly there's a lot of speculation as to the dodginess of that for years. It's interesting. I could see that some of the things that you go, yeah, some of his ideas have worked out or not, but then there's also just a lot of darkness there, and it doesn't seem like a particularly moral human being and a good. Well,
but all of this. That's all for part one. Coming up, humanity's slow decline into the abyss, tertiary education ban list, the legality of unisex toilets, and somehow an update to WhatsApp has made it into the news. Find out why in 2 minutes. See you shortly.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Andrew Doyle and Josh Howie. So we start this third with Andrew and news from the school lavatory.
Oh, what an interesting way of putting it. Suella Braverman, the Attorney-General, has said, or is going to say in a speech, that schools that offer gender-neutral lavatory facilities are acting unlawfully, and is effectively talking about how if a child at a school wants to socially transition their gender, parents need to be informed, which you would have thought was
a no-brainer.
You would have thought so, but apparently there have been a number of schools who have been telling pupils they don't need to inform their parents and effectively keeping that secret from them. So that's not good. And also, when it comes to the gender-neutral lavatory situation, schools have been prioritising the declared gender identity of pupils and not considering the feelings of other pupils who have to use those facilities as well, many of whom probably don't agree with the idea of a gender identity, because only a very small minority of people have a gender identity. Most people don't have one at all. So, you know, it just comes back to this.
You mean, sorry, they have no identity, or they have an identity that just goes along with their sex and they don't give it much thought?
Well, I think most people see themselves as either male or female, as being as mundane as being left or right-handed. I don't identify as being right-handed. I just am, and I don't identify as being male. I just am.
But I suppose if you find the wrong person, in your view, in your lavatory, that is an expression of something that you could say that was a sort of a sudden awakening of your gender.
Not gender, sex.
Right.
And I think that's the point. And I think particularly if you're a young person going through puberty, those things really do matter in all sorts of ways. And of course, this has come post the closure of the Tavistock Clinic, the gender paediatric clinic. And what this comes down to is there is now a growing, burgeoning kind of awareness of the problems of running a society on the basis of gender identity rather than biological sex.
Yeah.
And more and more people are waking up to the problems that this poses. And I think this is
And
ultimately an important
children
thing.
who
Yeah,
are
hugely.
extraordinarily fluid and if not damn right capricious, you know,
Yeah,
these kind of notions of who they are from one minute to the next.
And we know from studies with the Tavistock, and a lot of the whistleblowers of the Tavistock were pointing out, there are all sorts of reasons why young people can feel uncomfortable with their gender. Some will go on to experience sincere gender dysphoria in later life and will need to transition. The vast majority will be either autistic or gay or struggling with puberty, all these other things that tend to be resolved through either therapeutic measures, which some activists wanted to ban and started calling it trans conversion therapy, which is not what it is at all.
No.
You know, or it'll be resolved through puberty itself. But of course, if activists get their way, that's prevented through hormone blockers.
Josh, you have kids. I mean, how would you feel if you felt that that their school was willing to sort of connive with them behind your back?
Absolutely.
About
well,
not
to contradict what Andrew said, I mean, Andrew doesn't actually know very much about this particular issue.
How dare you?
No, but what they're actually doing, it's not that they now have to inform the parents, is that they have to actually get permission from the parents. And that's also a much better step in the right direction. There's a few other things here, but one of the things that she's saying is that the head teachers, and a lot of the reason why these things have happened is because head teachers haven't had the national guidance, because everybody's been asleep at the wheel on this issue. So guess who stepped in? Lobby groups. And of course, they're going to push, which is fair enough, their position. So that's the problem of what's happened. And that's why we need like governmental advice, because head teachers need to know now, you know, if you're a boy who identifies as a girl, does that mean you now get to go to a girls' school or whatever? Like, these sort of things need to be laid out in law.
I think it's interesting that you say, and we'll move on in just one second. It's interesting you say that this has been, you know, the initiative been taken by the lobby groups, and that's kind of fair enough. I don't think it is fair enough, actually, because the lobby groups were quite explicitly... like, incredibly... I mean, it wasn't just like campaigning. It was like, there's no debate. This is not up for discussion.
Not only that.
Assistance is not, you know...
No, I mean, Stonewall was misrepresenting the law.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying they're going to do what they do, and that's, you know, and unfortunately...
in the same way that criminals do what criminals do.
Yeah, they were going to go into...
So, Josh, the Telegraph now, with the somewhat ironically... The Telegraph, given this is a story about the struggles for security and rather more cutting-edge electronic messaging services. Maybe there is, like, motivated reasoning from the Telegraph on that front.
So WhatsApp is going to mirror Snapchat. I don't know if you guys have Snapchat. I allowed my son to get it the other day. So, and it's got a new screenshot blocking feature. So the idea is that if you send someone something that you don't really want people to know, in Snapchat anyway, it deletes itself after a while or after you've seen it. But people was taking, you know, screenshots of that. And they're going to so they're blocking that, or it sends a text or it sends a thing saying, by the way, someone just took a photo of that. So what you're going to have to do instead is get a second phone to take a photo of
you could trace over it with a felt tip.
Yeah, exactly, and then you've got to...
that was the whole point of Snapchat. That was the appeal.
Yeah,
that everything was ephemeral, and you could send the filthiest, obviously, messages. And
I'm assuming that's what it comes down to.
The internet is forever, right? I mean, anything that you've ever said on Twitter, somebody has got it.
I've said this before, and I said, whatever app you're using, whatever it is, do not write anything that you don't mind the whole world seeing, or send a photo, and just keep that in for life.
Absolutely. Although there is also the delicious thrill of having a small chat group in which you exchange things that would end everyone's career.
That was the idea of WhatsApp. You know, your messages are encrypted, so you can joke at work in the way that people used to joke before everything was taken too seriously. But even with WhatsApp, I mean, you know, all of these political scandals that come out, it's always a WhatsApp group of MPs. You know, I don't know why MPs don't just assume, as Josh has said, that everything they write is being published.
Well, even comedians have to assume that somebody's too
relatable.
But there is a feature that really excites me, which is the one where you can leave a WhatsApp group without the WhatsApp group knowing. Now, that is something, because I am in so many parents' WhatsApp groups. I'm so excited for this to be implemented.
So many groups that got set up during COVID and we all needed the company, but now, oh my God, it drags. Andrew, the Times now, and this one seems tailor-made for your preoccupations: free speech, censorship, and general woke bobbins at school and university.
I mean, this one is a study by the Times, and this is they've effectively done this. They've done 300 freedom of information requests to various universities across the country. They've sort of, you know, every now and then we get a story about a trigger warning being applied to a book here and there. They've just gone all out and sort of checked across the board.
Right.
And it's pretty damning, because it suggests here, or says here, that there have been more than 1,000 texts that have had trigger warnings applied to them by this investigation.
When you say text, you mean books?
Books. I mean,
WhatsApp text.
On my show at the weekend, we talked about a story had broken that one university was applying a trigger warning to Beowulf to say that there might be distressing scenes of monsters in this text. You know,
it's not nearly distressing enough.
No, right.
Beowulf, it's annoyingly tame. But
well, but this leads into other stories we've had. Ernest Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, with a trigger warning saying there would be scenes of graphic fishing. There was
the fish dies, by the way. Spoiler alert.
Pretty early on, and then it's gradually eaten. But you have Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped with scenes of kidnapping.
Study, one of the books that came under the scrutiny and which students were allowed to not read. It's not banned, but they're allowed to not read it. Is it an autobiography of a slave, an extraordinary text, which I hadn't heard of, I must admit, but it's obviously something that comes up in a certain course. It's not particularly long. It's just a truthful telling of her experience of being bought and sold in market and taken away from her mother.
And that's astonishing, isn't it? Because it means like a text like 12 Years a Slave wouldn't be, or would have a warning applied to it. Or
clearly not exploitational. I mean, I do understand. I mean, I try and reach some kind of meaningful compromise. I do understand if there are books, I don't know, American Psycho. I felt a bit. I don't know if it's considered literature, but there are scenes in that which are just really stomach turning, and you do have to question: would it be necessary for somebody to have to read that in class? I mean,
they go on and on.
It's an interesting text. It's relevant in terms of understanding modern American history. But this slave thing is nothing.
No, but you're right.
That.
It's not about exploitation in the way that, say, censorship of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is about concerns about a white author addressing issues of slavery. And they're talking about taking text like something like Toni Morrison's Beloved would be taken off in this. But it's about whether the students are feeling harmed. That's the phrase. They've mentioned here specifically Strindberg's Miss Julie, because there are discussions about suicide, right? Yeah. So then where does that leave Hamlet with the famous to be or not to be speech, which, guess what, is about suicide? I mean, this is kind of ridiculous.
Goethe's first great novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, was thought to have precipitated a trend of young men committing suicide. They were often dressed as young Werther. It was banned in several countries, and the clothing that was associated with him, these kind of like a fashion, was banned as well.
But we now know that that it's not true. And the real problem for this now is there is no justification for it. So I think universities have to stop applying trigger warnings, because it's not censorship, it's not quite the same, but it does suggest that it feeds into this narrative that words are harmful, and they are not. So they just have to stop doing it.
Midsummer Night's Dream, they said, is classist. I mean,
well, it is.
So what? That's what but this is how you learn about these things, by reading about them. But Liz Truss actually came out and said that real life doesn't come with a content warning. And that's absolutely right. And it's not preparing people for getting out there. And when you read some of these, just quickly about some of these examples of tutors and various lecturers, they're like, someone said that I said biological differences were potentially important and the character wasn't necessarily sexist, said that the teacher shut her down. Someone else said that a lecturer described Israel as the aggressors, and I put my hand up and said the situation was more complex. And he started crying.
Wow. That's a form of emotional blackmail.
Yeah, this is Sussex University.
Oh, wow. That doesn't surprise me.
Wednesday's Mail now. Good news for people who hate the human race and want to see it over and done with.
Yeah. So Britain's baby bust. And I was instantly going to bust and then bust. Whatever.
A baby bust, you mean like a breastfeeding thing?
I got there about 3 times later. Has been revealed. There's these time-lapse maps that have shown how the decrease in birth rates over the last 10 years. It's been quite a big jump, although there was a small rise last year, interesting, and an uptick in older mothers anyway. Yeah. But which is, 35 to 39-year-olds went up 5%. Under 20-year-olds went down 16%, which seems maybe that's possibly a good thing. Although overall, a lot of people, not a lot, but some scientists and people like Elon Musk are arguing that we've got a big crisis on our hands because in a few years' time, there's not going to be enough young people to be taking care of pensioners and whatnot. So
I think
that's what they're...
it's an absolute... it's a much longer term thing. I mean, they're talking about the pandemic has lowered it a little bit, but for 20 or 30, since the invention of the birth control pill, it's been on the slide, and
here we go.
More and more women are getting educated, having careers, trying to get one in just before last orders, but it's, there's...
And longer lives, of course. People
but check this out. So a cited Lancet study says in Japan, Spain and Portugal, their population is going to be half what they are now by 2100.
Well, not the
2001.
entire, I mean, but it's the
entire
shape. It used to be called a population pyramid because
Yeah.
it was that shape. Lots of people at the bottom, fewer people at the top. It's now literally top-heavy in several European countries.
They thought the pandemic might solve it insofar as everyone's back at home and so they won't have much else to do but
But it would
copulate.
have solved it if they just let it run.
Didn't happen,
That
though.
would have been-
No, well, it didn't happen, and essentially because people said that they're now the fears of the virus is what stopped people procreate.
Yeah.
Also, their ability to access medical facilities whilst pregnant. But I actually think the real reason was that people were homeschooling, and I certainly know that after that, I was asleep at 8 o'clock.
You think about it twice as well, having any more of the little bleeders. Anyway, talking of little bleeders, NHS leaflets failing to state the bleeding obvious. This is in the Telegraph.
Well, there's so many of these sort of stories, and this latest one is an advice leaflet from NHS Wales, which is using gender-neutral terms. This is a leaflet called Bloody Brilliant, which is obviously about menstruation, and it's using the terms people who bleed.
Right.
When, of course, the less cumbersome phrase would be women. But this is happening again and again. We've even had sanitary products such as Kotex in America referring to menstruators. We've had Tampax in this country talk about people who bleed, and this adds, this feeds into all sorts of things. We've had,
Ovary havers.
Ovary havers, people with a cervix. That was CNN, I think.
It's always the women who get described in these weird reductionist terms.
We never have testicle havers. We don't have the people with a prostate. So, I mean, there's no wonder that feminists are convinced that gender ideologues are trying to erase women specifically, and that there's a misogyny at the core of this movement. I mean, certainly also bleeders. I'm sorry, If I were to come up with the most misogynistic phrase I could think of,
well, funny enough, I mentioned American Psycho. There's I won't even say it. There's a very notorious way of referring to women in that.
Right. Well, there we go. And I'm sure it's pretty akin to what we're seeing here. So what I don't understand
is cervix havers.
I have read that book as well, but I can't recall which bit you mean.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going into a break now, so I will tell you in the ad break. That's it for part 2. It is no more. It has ceased to be. It is an X section. But fear not, part 3 will be resurrected with the double standards around male hair dye, doggy dating, and why you might not want to book your hen do in Barcelona. See you shortly.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Watching Westworld at the moment.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Andrew Doyle and Josh Howie. We're into the final third. Josh, The Guardian now. When I hear spyware, I think of James Bond's elegant tailoring, possibly a shabby trench coat and a pull-down hat, but in fact, it's an app, is it?
Well, it's many apps. It's sort of the software this Canadian cybersecurity expert is giving a big talk about it. Ron Debert, he's a political science professor at University of Toronto, and he's basically saying that it's like they're a wiretap on steroids, and there's no formal oversight, and they're the biggest global threat to global rights and democracy.
To be clear, is this like national?
Well, this is international,
security?
but he's talking to Toronto government. Yeah. The US has actually started taking moves to curtail certain companies, which they probably found out before that actually happened.
So would this include, for instance, everyone now, I think, has a suspicion that their phone is listening to them in order to present adverts to them?
I think, no, this is more companies being able to get into your phone and turn on the camera or your laptops and all these things. Wow. And I believe that was what was used with the Saudi Arabian journalists who got murdered. There was something.
It has been used. I mean, particularly this Pegasus spyware, which was developed in Israel, has been used specifically to target journalists, and it can do exactly what Josh says. It can turn on your camera. Yeah. It can film you without knowing. It can send messages as you without you knowing. Wow. But the problem is, it's been taken up by all sorts of dodgy groups.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So it's not. We're not just talking about government intelligence.
I remember seeing footage a couple of years ago of Zuckerberg had his laptop and he had elastoplast over his camera.
So, really?
Yeah. So
well, that's suspicious, isn't it?
It's interesting.
But I mean, a lot of us are worried about these things listening to us, and I mean, I don't think it's true that they're listening, and that's why the advert pops up that you were just talking about. Apparently, it's because they have such a detailed profile of us that the things are going to appear that we are naturally going to like.
And also, we have that kind of conspiracy theory, patent-seeking.
Yeah, constant ads for Viagra.
But I have a friend, and I know this sounds suspicious, but he's a barrister, and he is. I think I remember prosecuted or defended a case in which somebody was being blackmailed by a pornography site. Essentially, they'd gone onto YouPorn or whatever, a PornTube or whatever. Was it?
I don't know what they're called.
What is it called? Pornhub.
Never heard of them.
Yeah.
And if there are certain sites on there, sort of sites within sites. You go down rabbit holes. Before you know exactly this thing, they had footage of him.
Yeah.
Of this guy, accessing their site, and then they blackmail it, and it's horrific. I mean, you might not even be watching anything weird. Obviously, if you are watching something weird, then it's worse. But you wouldn't even. I mean, no man is a hero to his search engine, is he? Do you know?
But that's the fear, isn't it? It's not. Obviously, intelligence agencies around the world are going to develop this stuff, but it's whose hands they fall into and how they get used. It is pretty terrifying.
It is. The Mirror now, Andrew, which is the other thing you shouldn't spend too much time looking at. The world's second greatest female tennis player is retiring, or evolving, possibly.
Serena Williams, well, she's won 23 Grand Slam titles. She's now saying she's going to retire. She's had this rather beautiful photo shoot in Vogue, and she's 40. She says she wants to spend more time with her family, with her daughter. Fair enough. I mean, she's achieved an awful lot, and also she's in a position where I would imagine she's set for life. I don't think.
But it's going to be weird, isn't it? I mean, not for her fans, but it is odd. I would imagine if your life is so intensely concerned or focused on one thing.
I was speaking. One of my guests on my show was Mari Yamauchi, the athlete, who was talking about this particular thing about athletes. Their shelf life is short. They retire young.
41 is amazing.
It is amazing, So they psychologically have to deal with this thing that they have to find something else to do with their life. Whereas most of us keep trudging on until the bitter end.
I mean, like football players, some of them, can become managers, but that is, I suppose, broadly speaking, 1 in 11, isn't it?
Very rare. Or commentators.
Commentators, a handful.
Yeah, it's interesting that she's going to miss it, because I read Andre Agassi's autobiography, which is a brilliant book written by a brilliant writer who sort of ghostwrote it. So it's sort of almost like high art.
He's an Armenian, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. But obviously America, but raised in America. Yeah. And his dad literally had a paddle on his hand when he was a baby, like that. So it was all about his dad's obsession. And actually, the whole thing about the book is how much Andre Agassi loathes tennis and loathed it all through his life, even when he was winning.
And the fact that he was bald from an early age, and that incredible hairstyle he had.
That's why I read the book.
Yes, absolutely true.
I did not know that.
Apparently it's a great book, though. I have heard
that. It is great, yeah.
Well, I mean, King Richard would suggest that Serena's background is not dissimilar, but she seems to kind of have integrated.
Well, all of them
must have great hair.
They must have had pushy parents, all of them. It's like the Michael Jackson story all over again. But some of them love the game, and it's clear that Serena Williams does.
Castration. Josh, a happy, sad follow-up to yesterday's news about the passing of Olivia Newton-John. It turns out Grease and Xanadu, not her most significant legacy, in fact.
Well, she's been fighting breast cancer for 30 years, and that's a long time. And during that time, she started a foundation that has done a lot of good and pushed a lot more awareness of breast cancer, but also, from what I understand, the use of plant medicines, I think
she's quite keen on the marijuana.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and CBD oil or
but
whatever.
in particular, from my understanding is that she's worked a lot to encourage the development of the science that understands the predisposition to breast cancer through the genetics. Great. And this is like really key, a bit like the same way Angelina Jolie had the preemptive mastectomy, I think.
Yeah, double mastectomy,
that kind of stuff, you know.
So, and that's
30 years is an incredibly long time to have been battling on and off.
And they're saying, please donate to that foundation. Rather than like sending flowers and stuff like that. And I think people, it's a strange thing when that's someone who's just, because Greece, I think predominantly Greece, it's just in your bones when you grow up and you're just watching it.
Well, one of the things I love, which kind of integrates the two, and I was reading about this afterwards in more detail than I managed to yesterday, was that she had an auction where she sold the iconic leather jacket and the spandex pants that she wears. The CEO of Spanx bought the pants, and this was to raise money for the Breast Cancer Foundation for about $200,000. Some anonymous billionaire bought the jacket for nearly $500,000. $500,000. That's right. And then gave it back to her and said, "Listen, this is not appropriate. That I'm giving the money to charity." Okay. It was really sweet.
Nice. She just sold it again.
Sold
it for a tenner.
Anyway, bless you, Olivia. Andrew, the Telegraph now tackling one of the last great taboos, or grey taboos. I don't know.
This is a total non-story by the Telegraph, which is about Liam Gallagher. So apparently Liam Gallagher, who I don't follow on Instagram, I don't really know how to use it, he posted a selfie, and because he was standing in the sun, it looked quite light, and then people started going on about how he dyed his hair, and he was just saying, no, it's just the sunshine.
Well, he said sunshine.
They actually quoted it like that with the extra eyes, which is quite funny. But really what this is an opinion piece about how, off the back of that, about how there's a taboo around men don't talk about going grey. I don't think that's true. I think they do.
But it is taboo to dye your hair, like, really obviously. I won't mention it, but I saw a media figure recently. I was at a do and he was there, and he was a DJ, and he was a young man, and he was a bit of a sort of, not exactly a sex icon, but a man associated with, well, he's in his 70s now and his hair is still jet black, and you do kind of go, oh, come on.
Yeah, but I mean, for a pop star...
It's not taboo, I suppose.
Pop stars dye their hair completely different colours all the time, and I'm really surprised that...
Was it Gary Glitter?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to guess who you were hanging out with.
It was not Gary.
No, but Gary... Oh, no, OK. But it's also talking about how men don't talk about hair transplant surgery, and they just do. I've been talking to men about this...
I dye my beard. We talk about that.
You look great, mate.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, but you did it for a role.
But
no, I did it for Ego the other day.
If you get a convincing quiff on the front, I would wear one.
I do.
It's just the fear that it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I was thinking about getting a wig, like bringing him back into fashion or whatever. But like you say, we do talk about this. We have talked about this. And this is the most annoying kind of article where they sort of say, this is my fact of the day. The fact remains that in 2022, you could choose your pronouns, but a man merely changing his hair colour will cause so much consternation. No, mate, that ain't a fact.
No,
you know what I mean? And then he chooses, as an example of silver-haired people and how that's a good thing. He says, "Oh, we got Silver Surfer." What are you talking about, Silver Surfer?
They're trying to find.
He was virtually transparent.
They do the same with women, though. Like there was this big article the other week about how the menopause is such a taboo. No one ever talks about the menopause. It's like, yes. They do. There's a new book about the menopause every week.
They just don't talk about it in their 20s.
Right.
That's fair enough, But of course, absolutely.
That's how celebrities write books about the menopause. I
love that thing when they go when people have babies and they go, "Oh, there's no manual." There is no subject on which there are more manuals than having a baby. It's an extraordinarily well documented.
I think it's just journalists trying to find something to.
Hilarious. Josh, doggy dating tips now, also from the Telegraph. I could have sworn this is precisely the opposite advice to what we were announcing.
I think this actually makes a lot of sense. So they're basically saying size matters for men using a dog to win a woman's heart. Which, you would think, oh, I've got a big dog, and what is that? It's like a car, it's like having, or maybe that's the opposite. But the point is that what they're actually saying is that, first of all, seeing someone with a dog is a good thing. I think it's like you care for an animal.
Reliable.
Yeah, reliable. But the idea is that having the big person with a small dog, it somehow makes you look safer.
Right.
And so they're saying if you want to make women feel secure, And this is from the University of Jaén in Spain, recruited 300 women and showed them all these photos. Basically, have a smaller dog. So this is I'm calling this my serial killer tip of the day.
Okay.
Get a small dog, serial killers, and then you can lure women into a full sense of security. Yeah.
I wouldn't buy it. I think of like Bill Sykes with his dog, Bullseye. Then I don't consider it a thing that would...
Also, like
it's
the Bond villains.
Size, though,
Cats,
Some small dogs can be really yappy and annoying.
They can.
I can't imagine having a bloke having a Chihuahua would be very safe. But a Dachshund, they're quite cool. Everyone wants to stroke.
Well, they're really cute, aren't they?
They're really
cute. Are they suggesting here that if a man wants to attract women, he should have a dog and walk? Same with babies. Apparently, if you have a baby, that attracts
even small ones.
I walk out. We have a golden retriever, and I walk it in the park, and it is such an absurdly effective people magnet. Not just single women.
Everyone wants to come up and meet the dog.
The dog must feel like Jesus, It's like come and touch the hem of his garment. It's an extraordinarily powerful. Yeah, it's a great thing.
But then, like you say, what is the point of the article then? Is it encouraging? It looks like a dodgy tip.
This is very Telegraph.
Andrew, now the Daily Star, and it sounds like AI might finally manage to make my mother-in-law's only cherished unfulfilled fantasy come true.
See, I don't like stories like this. So apparently AI is being developed. Well, I don't like any stories about AI because I don't trust it. But apparently they're going to be able to let dogs speak to us. Apparently to the extent of a 1-year-old baby. I don't know if they speak at all. But
they don't speak at all.
No, they don't.
Nonsense,
OK, so they're saying that they could interpret, the computers could interpret the emotions of the hound and turn that into language. But I don't think they could because dogs just don't see the world in the way that we see the world. And I don't understand how this could possibly be. It would be a weird approximation of what this computer thinks the dog is feeling.
Whereas the whole, well, not the whole, but a large part of the joy of owning a dog is learning a second language, i.e. the expression of the dog's face. Dogs are very, very expressive. It's like listening to a Beethoven symphony and going, could you get an AI that will tell me how I'm supposed to feel about it?
Isn't the case that part of our love for the dogs is because we tend to anthropomorphise their behaviour? We know if they come up and lick our face, it's probably because there's bits of food, not because they love us. But why would we want to ruin it by communicating with the dogs?
Well, I don't know, but this South Korean company already has this AI-powered dog collar that measures their emotional state. But like you said, surely if you're in tune with your dog, you're going to know if they're happy or sad anyway. But I kind of excited about it because I love Up. It's one of my favourite films.
That's exactly what I thought.
That's that dog. Is it Ralph? Anyway, so it'll be quite... Have you seen Up?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, my God. The first 20 minutes is proper tearful.
Oh, it's incredible.
very, very...
That's before what they call it, the cold open, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll avoid that. I want happy
films.
I don't want depressing films.
It's a brilliant 20 minutes.
It's a masterpiece. But then, that's right, he goes to a sort of Peruvian plateau.
Yeah, and there's... I think is it Ralph or something?
And the man has all the
and all these dogs have these... Yeah, and all the dogs can speak. And they've got different types of voices. It's funny.
It's a very clever film. The Guardian now, Josh. Tesla's dark side is revealed in the latest road safety.
Yeah, so self-driving technology fails to detect children on the road. And this has repeatedly happened in experiments, and this has kind of been revealed as a company...
These are the same little mannequins we had yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I know. In those cases, you want to run those over because they're so terrifying. But, yeah, they're saying... that this person who's sort of put out this study has basically said they're a lethal threat to all Americans. But I would say, actually, not most of them are massive, so they're safe. I think it's the smaller ones that are slightly...
Is it something about the immobility of the mannequin, do you think? I mean, not that should, it should be...
Well, I'm sure maybe they have moving mannequins, or I'm sure they have something... But obviously the sensors are in the wrong...
genuine failure of... I'm not, not bigging up Tesla, but, you would think they had overcome that sort of degree of... It's extraordinary oversight. They are claiming...
I'm just, again, like all this kind of technology, self-driving cars, I'm against it. I don't like the robots taking over.
C.S. Lewis saw the whole of this. What do we got? The Guardian now, and the police taking the bar out of Barcelona, is that right?
OK, well, the Barcelona government...
Barcelona, please.
I'm sorry, I'm not like you with the accents,
Don't offend me.
Is that the Andalusia, isn't it, where they do that? Do they do it in Catalonia?
Is that right?
Yeah,
I heard that the Spanish list was an affectation which developed because there was a celebrity back in the day in the medieval period.
King.
Was that right?
One of the Habsburg kings, he could pronounce his essays properly.
And now it's just become a thing.
Madrid.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well,
same as George III couldn't do his waistcoats up, and that's why nobody has their button on their waistcoat done up, because George III was...
Well, there we go.
No, sorry, George IV, the Prince Regent, the fat one,
Well, however we pronounce Barcelona, the government there is cracking down on these outdoor drinking parties, which apparently are not a new thing. They've always been quite popular in Barcelona, but since the pandemic...
They've got a word, they've got a name for it.
They have a word for it, but I won't attempt it.
Botelos or something.
Is that right?
Botelones.
Botelones.
Again, you with the accents. But during the pandemic, of course, when you had to go outside for parties, everyone was doing it and they really exploded in popularity. And now they're having to clamp down and they're sort of saying, we're going to give €600 fines. It seems a bit killjoy, doesn't it?
It would be a much better way of doing it. They should do it in this country as well. They should massively reduce the duty that pubs are expected to pay on drinks that they sell. We should encourage people back into pubs and bars.
Absolutely agree.
Everyone's biggest shock coming out of lockdown was going into a pub and seeing how much they wanted to charge to make your glass wet with whiskey. That's not a measure. How much? This is why people drink at home. This is why they become alcoholics. This is dysfunctional. It'd be much better to nip together. Anyway, that's all we have time for. My little rant. Thank you to my guests, Andrew Doyle and Josh Howie. Headliners will be back tomorrow night with Andrew Doyle, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. An absolute pleasure spending this evening with you. I'm off up to Edinburgh tomorrow, and if you're in that part of the world, do come and say hello. Thank you very much.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight.